you can get away without missing out. Whether you're traveling across Idaho or just spending more time outside, the Connector keeps you up to date with the local stories that matter, from wildfire season to community news. Stay connected to Idaho with the Connector, Idaho Daily News. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. A year ago, Montana Senator Tim Sheehy was pushing a big change in the way the federal government fights wildfires, including a proposal to get rid of Forest Service inspections of the private planes and helicopters used to fight fires. Sheehy knows that business well. Before he was elected to the Senate, he founded Bridger Aerospace, a Montana-based aerial firefighting company that has received more than $235 million in Forest Service contracts since 2021. Well, now, new reporting from ProPublica has found that at about the same time Sheehy was trying to eliminate those inspections, a Forest Service inspector found a crack in the wing of a Bridger aircraft that had been presented as ready to fly. Abe Street is one of the reporters who investigated the story, and he's joining us now to talk more. Abe, thanks so much for making time for us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with that inspection, Abe. What exactly did the Forest Service inspector find on this Bridger aircraft, and how serious was it?
Well, it was in the annual inspection process, what's known as the carding process, airworthiness inspectors inspect, contracted aircraft to see if they're ready to go and to fly, to fight fires. And those inspectors often find issues, what they call discrepancies, ranging from small to large, but in this case, it was a significant issue. It was a crack in a wing.
So what caught my attention in your reporting is the timing on this, because while this aircraft was being repaired, Senator Sheehy's office was pushing a proposal that would have eliminated those types of inspections. So what do you know about how closely that those two things overlapped?
Well, I think that, as you point out, the timing of them was close. But Senator Sheehy was in office at that time. He was no longer the CEO of and the head of Bridger Aerospace. But at the time, he still held quite a significant amount of stock in the company.
So Sheehy has been really outspoken in arguing that these Forest Service inspections are not necessary. What's his argument for getting rid of these inspections?
I think that, my understanding of the argument, which he didn't speak with me for this story, but in his public comments, in his book, and in statements from his office, is that they're reflective of what he has characterized as a bureaucratic sclerosis, a sort of slow-moving bureaucratic apparatus that has built up around the fire service, over decades, and that we could be fighting fires quicker and responding more swiftly. And I think that and more efficiently. And it's also true that it's often said that some of the rules that he has objected to governing these processes in aviation in particular are written in blood. That's a saying that a lot of people who work in this field in fire aviation use. These rules are written in blood because of the number of fatal accidents that happened over the years. And then the Forest Service, which does the vast, vast, vast majority of these inspections, set up a very rigorous inspection process to respond to those issues.
So what's the response then from people inside the Forest Service and the aerial firefighting world? I mean, do they see these inspections as bureaucratic red tape or as an important, safety layer?
I think that people see it as an important safety layer. That also does have some, there have been times when both Interior and Forest Service agencies have inspected the same aircraft. The sort of rush every spring in the carding process can at times create a backlog. So there's an acknowledgement of the issues around that, but like the predominant sentiment is that it's a hugely important safety layer. And I think that as the conversations continue about and we continue to hear, in coming days, weeks, months, conversation about whether or not the Forest Service and the Interior's wildland firefighting capabilities will be combined, I think it's very important to pay attention to that question of what's going to happen to the airworthiness inspections on the aircraft that these agencies fly and contract.
You put these inspections into some pretty sobering historical context. There were two deadly air tanker crashes back in 2002, and they involved structural failures and wing cracks. So, how did those crashes change the way the Forest Service oversees these aircrafts now?
Yeah, I mean that was part of um, the the deadly history that I referenced, and that sort of led to um, congressional inquiry and the establishment of the Forest Service, modern airworthiness program.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of well-earned public scrutiny and an assessment that the program as it existed at that time uh, wasn't keeping people safe. And so then like the agency made dramatic changes at that point. And that the sort of modern iteration of the airworthiness program was put into place in 2010.
So, since the Forest Service put that current airworthiness program in place, as you said, in 2010, what has happened to the accident and fatality rate in the last, 16 years?
Well, it is plummeted according to the Forest Service data.
So, let's talk specifically about Bridger Aerospace for a minute, if we can. What did the inspection records that you obtained tell you about the company's history with the Forest Service as well as its inspectors?
Well, the inspection records themselves were heavily redacted by the Forest Service. We have appealed those redactions, and as part of that, I would say that the FAA maintains and releases to the public sort of analogous maintenance records. The records showed that in the records that we reviewed and obtained centered around Bridger's scoopers, which are amphibious aircraft that fly into bodies of water to retrieve it before dropping it on fires. And there were some issues that were not redacted that you could see in there related to like the avionics, the electronics, for example, to an engine. But in talking to people who are expert in this field and reporting over months, the more significant issue that
Mhm.
came up was in the wing of this aircraft. And as part of that, I think it's important to note that Senator Sheehy called those aircraft when he wrote about them in his book, new and brand new scoopers. And the FAA, there are records that show that they are in fact older airframes that have
Mhm.
had extensive work done on them in previous years.
There's an obvious financial question here because Sheehy founded Bridger. And when this proposal was being discussed, it's my understanding that he still owned millions of dollars worth of stock in that company. So, what did you learn about his financial relationship with Bridger while he was advocating for these changes? I mean, we should say that he has since put most of that stock into a blind trust. And so he says that's eliminated any conflict of interest.
That's right. So when he was advocating, when this proposal from his office first leaked that would have eliminated the airworthiness program, he still owned millions of dollars of stock in the company. He has since moved that stock into two blind trusts that he says eliminates any conflict of interest. Our reporting shows that those blind trusts are managed by executives who work at a company that until recently was run by Sheehy's brother, who was also a significant early investor in Bridger.
Mm. The story seems to go beyond just Senator Sheehy and just, this one company. Because the aerial firefighting industry itself is pushing for contractors to have a more significant role, it seems, in determining whether their own aircraft are safe to fly. So, how would a system like that work?
I think the details of that I are not entirely clear yet. But the argument there's a there's an industry group called UEFA that Senator Sheehy was instrumental in its early days. And it advocates for the industry, and it says it advocates for improved efficiency and improved safety. And in reporting the story, the policy director for the group, Tiffany Taylor, talked to me about this idea that contractors could develop their own inspection standards. And in talking to people in the aviation safety and airworthiness world, uh, that idea is seen as an extremely uh, bold, radical idea that would call into question the impartiality of these inspections.
Mhm. So, supporters of changing the current system do point to some legitimate problems. There aren't many inspectors. Inspections can delay aircraft getting into service. And then there can be duplication between agencies. So, I'm curious about the agreement. I mean, how much agreement is there that this current system needs reform?
I think that, I mean, I think you're wise to avoid it generalizations. I think that there's a diversity of opinions on that. Um,
Mm,
but I think that it's acknowledged that there are like inefficiencies, and it's also widely acknowledged that the inspections are there to keep people alive. Senator Sheehy in his criticisms and his um, in the public posture he's taking around reforming the way that wildfire is fought has talked a lot about uh, bureaucratic inefficiencies. That's and trying to make things um, faster and more effective. And I think that the uh, there are a lot of conversations around that going on right now, from aviation to the broader fire service. That is important to keep in mind is that we are in a really severe wildfire season right now. We're in what's called preparedness level 5. Resources are stretched thin, and a lot of people are jittery throughout the West, right? And
mhm.
have and as happens when then there are severe seasons, there are people who have suffered a great deal. And I think it's important to keep in mind something that people in the aviation world said repeatedly to me in the reporting of this, which is that, aircraft don't put wildfires out. They are an important part of the broad, very complicated apparatus that has been built up over decades to manage wildfire in this country, and they are not a silver bullet, and they are part of the toolkit and at times a very essential part. And it's the wildland firefighters on the ground who ultimately rob the fires of fuel so
Mm.
that they go out.
So, before I let you go, just really quick, has the federal government made any changes since you first reported on this in June?
Well, there have been a lot of changes that within Interior and the Forest Service. And I think that, Senator Sheehy has driven this idea that that these agencies should be consolidated into one. Um, it's clear, and our reporting shows that he has an animosity toward the Forest Services, some of their procedures, including the inspection process. As those conversations continue and are likely to continue in coming months, I think it's important to keep asking that question about what's going to happen to those inspections. But I think that there are a lot of really large, complicated questions that go into this idea of whether or not the Forest Service, as this vast fire apparatus, could be moved into the interiors. People likened it to forcing a minnow to swallow a whale, and it's a really big, complicated, at times burdened agency, and trying to do such a move, uh, even in the name of efficiencies, in the middle of a really severe fire season raises questions that I think, warrant further scrutiny.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. We've been speaking with ProPublica reporter Abe Street. You've been listening to the Idaho Matters podcast from Boise State Public Radio. To stay in touch, you can find quick Idaho daily news every morning when you subscribe to the Connector podcast. Are you subscribed to this Idaho Matters podcast yet? Make sure you're following so you never miss an episode.
The fatal shooting of a teenager at a protest in Seattle has gone unsolved for 6 years.
This is open in your face. How are there no answers?
Our investigation has uncovered new evidence and witnesses who say they've never talked to police.
Did police ever call you?
Not once.
Listen to We Keep Us Safe, a new true crime series on the Embedded podcast from NPR.